America knew Harriet Nelson as the perfect TV mother, but she started performing at 6 weeks old in dangerous theaters. She danced at the Cotton Club while mobsters watched. She told dirty jokes at parties. She secretly smoked since age 13. Her first marriage ended in violence and scandal. When the cameras stopped rolling, she poured cocktails and embraced people society rejected. The woman who taught America about family values was hiding secrets that would have destroyed her career. Her real story changes everything. She wasn't even old enough to hold her head up, but Harriet Nelson was already on stage. Born Peggy Lou Snyder on July 18, 1909 in Des Moines, Iowa, she was just 6 weeks old when she made her theatrical debut. Her parents were actors in a traveling stock company, and they brought their newborn daughter into the act as part of the show. It wasn't a brief appearance or a family photo op. It was an actual role in a real performance. Newspapers at the time even mentioned it. That moment became one of the earliest documented stage debuts for an infant in American theater. It wasn't just about starting young. Harriet was born into a world where the stage was the family's life, and she grew up under the spotlights with audiences watching before she even learned to talk. By age 3, she was already speaking on stage. Her first real speaking role came while performing with her parents' stock company. These weren't small-time productions. The stock companies were fast-paced and relentless, performing different plays each night, often with only a single day of rehearsal. Harriet had to learn quickly, adapt instantly, and perform like a pro surrounded by adults. But she wasn't just memorizing lines. She was holding her own. People noticed. She wasn't a novelty anymore. She was a real performer. Despite the constant travel, Harriet still went to school. She studied at St. Agnes Academy, a respected school with strict academic standards. But her education wasn't traditional. During the school year, she stayed grounded in studies. During breaks, she hit the road and took the stage. Her parents planned their tours carefully, making sure she could still go to school while performing during holidays. That balance between books and theater took serious discipline. She might have been young, but she was already managing 2 lives, one in classrooms, one under stage lights. Everything changed in 1925. Harriet was just 16 when her parents separated. The split didn't just break the family. It forced her to make a choice between her mother and father, between stability and her dreams. It was a hard, painful moment, and it came right when she was stepping into adulthood. But Harriet didn't wait around for life to decide for her. She chose her path, leaned into independence, and moved forward without looking back. That break pushed her to grow up fast. From then on, she wasn't just a child of performers. She was becoming the star herself. Just 3 months before high school graduation, she made another bold move. She dropped out to join the Capitol Theatre's Corps de Ballet. For most teens, that would have been reckless. But Harriet knew what she wanted. The Capitol Theatre was a serious place. The ballet corps wasn't easy to get into. She traded her diploma for real experience, and that decision paid off. She gained professional training and dove even deeper into live performance. It was a risk, but one that helped shape the rest of her career. Not long after, she found herself performing at one of the most electric and dangerous spots in New York, the Cotton Club in Harlem. It was the late 1920s, and the Cotton Club was the epicenter of jazz and vice. Though located in Black Harlem, it only served white guests. The performers, however, were black, and among them were legends like Duke Ellington, Cab Calloway, and Louis Armstrong. Harriet was there in the thick of it. Each night she performed in a place bursting with music, money, and mobsters. Men like Lucky Luciano and Dutch Schultz were regulars, lurking in the shadows, running the club from behind the scenes. For a young woman, it was as dangerous as it was dazzling. But she didn't flinch. She learned how show business really worked, from its shining lights to its darkest corners. Amid all the glamour and chaos, she also picked up a habit that would haunt her for the rest of her life. At just 13, she started smoking cigarettes. Back then, smoking was part of the culture, especially in entertainment. It made you look older, edgier, more elegant. But the damage started early. Decades later, she would struggle with breathing problems, coughing fits, and lung issues that never went away. Her addiction wasn't just a side note. It was a slow-burning tragedy that followed her all the way to the end. While many performers chased fame, Harriet worked steadily behind the scenes, sharpening her craft in vaudeville. She became the straight woman in comedy acts with legends like Ken Murray and Bert Lahr. She wasn't the one getting the laughs, but she was setting them up perfectly. That kind of timing doesn't come easy. Lahr, who later played the Cowardly Lion in The Wizard of Oz, had wild, over-the-top energy. Harriet balanced that with calm, crisp delivery. She was the steady force that made their acts click. City to city, show after show, she never stopped. Vaudeville was exhausting, traveling constantly, performing multiple times a day, but she kept up and she kept getting better. Then came the big break. The Palace Theater in New York was the holy grail for vaudeville performers. If you played the Palace, you'd made it. Harriet performed there not once, but 4 times in the 1930s. That stage didn't hand out second chances easily. Crowds there were tough. Expectations were high. But every time Harriet delivered, her name got more recognition. Critics noticed. Casting agents noticed. Audiences came back. Her Palace appearances opened doors to the next stage of her career. She had gone from stock company toddler to vaudeville headliner. Harriet Nelson was just 21 years old when she made the biggest mistake of her young life. In 1930, she married comedian Roy Sedley, a man 9 years older, smooth-talking, and already deep in New York's wild nightlife. They met at the Cotton Club, a glamorous hot spot full of music, lights, and danger. It felt like a dream at first, but it wasn't long before that dream turned into a nightmare. Sedley was violent, reckless, and dragged Harriet into a world of chaos. She had grown up in show business, but this was something darker, something she hadn't been ready for. The marriage wasn't just troubled. It was cruel. Sedley drank hard, partied harder, and treated Harriet with emotional and verbal abuse that scarred her. He had a temper. He had a crowd of hard-living showbiz friends. And Harriet, still just a young woman, was stuck right in the middle of it. The bright lights of the Cotton Club faded quickly, replaced by fights, threats, and loneliness. Sedley's life wasn't glamorous. It was dangerous. And Harriet was living it night after night. She left him after a year, but legally she wasn't free. That took 2 more painful years. By 1931, she was separated. But Sedley still held power over her life. The courts were slow and Sedley wasn't cooperative. So Harriet kept performing while trapped in legal limbo. She took any job she could. Vaudeville shows, dancing gigs, straight woman roles alongside comedians like Ken Murray and Bert L. She had to smile on stage while dealing with a mess behind the scenes. She couldn't move forward. Not yet. The annulment finally came in 1933. It was over on paper, but the trauma lingered. That same year, something changed. In 1932, still legally married but emotionally free, Harriet met a saxophone player named A.Z. Nelson. He was calm, he was smart, he was everything Roy wasn't. Their connection was instant, both on stage and off. But in the 1930s, their bond was controversial. Harriet was still Mrs. Sedley in name. Yet here she was performing, laughing, and falling in love with another man. The gossip started fast, but she didn't care. A.Z. made her feel safe. A.Z. hired her as the vocalist for his band. She took a new stage name, Harriet Hilliard, to leave her past behind. Most female singers were background noise in big bands. Harriet wasn't. She had charm, energy, and control. Within weeks, she was the center of attention. She didn't just sing. She entertained. She joked with A.Z., teased the crowd, and pulled everyone in with her smile. By 1933, she wasn't just recovering. She was rising. That summer, they landed a gig at the Glen Island Casino. It was the place to be. Wealthy crowds, high society guests, and radio broadcasts that reached across America. Harriet and A.Z. lit up the stage. Every night the place filled up. Their names were spreading fast. Their chemistry, their music, their story. It all clicked. This wasn't luck. It was lightning in a bottle. AZ saw something else in Harriet, too. He started writing funny duets just for her. Not the typical sweet love songs, but sharp, cheeky numbers where Harriet got the punchlines. One of their biggest hits, and then some had her teasing AZ right on stage. The audience loved it. She wasn't just a pretty voice. She was bold, witty, and fearless. It was rare. It was fresh. It was real. Women weren't supposed to talk back like that in the 1930s. Harriet did. And she made it look easy. All of it. The music, the laughter, the new name, the packed shows was building towards something bigger. In 1935, Harriet married AZ. This time it was different. There were no secrets, just two people who understood each other and wanted the same things. A home, a family, a future built on trust, not trauma. The marriage was more than love. It was stability. It was everything Harriet never had with Sedley, and it showed. Within a year, they were working on radio together. By the late 1930s, they were household names. Their success didn't just happen. It was earned step by step through pain, risk, and second chances. In 1936, Harriet Nelson signed a one-year contract with RKO Radio Pictures. She was 27, fresh from Broadway and the nightclub scene and already a seasoned performer who had been on stage since the age of 3. This contract was no small step. RKO was one of Hollywood's top studios, home to giants like Katharine Hepburn and Fred Astaire. The deal guaranteed her 3 films and the possibility of more provided she succeeded. It marked her first big step away from performing with AZ Nelson's band, and both she and AZ had agreed that this was her time to shine solo. That same year, she landed a key role in Follow the Fleet, one of RKO's most anticipated films. It wasn't just any musical. It starred Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers at the height of their fame. Harriet played Connie Martin, a romantic lead opposite Randolph Scott. The film came out on Valentine's Day in 1936 and became a smash hit, pulling in over $3 million. That was a huge number back then. Critics praised her performance, especially her chemistry with Scott, and audiences were drawn to her voice, screen presence, and easy charm. With songs by Irving Berlin, including the classic Let's Face the Music and Dance, the film helped cement her place in Hollywood. She wasn't just a singer anymore. She was now a legitimate movie star. As the 1940s began and World War II took hold, Harriet's career shifted gears again. Hollywood needed feel-good stories, light-hearted comedies, and musicals to lift spirits, and she fit that demand perfectly. Between 1941 and 1944, she starred in a string of films designed for wartime escapism. In Sweetheart of the Campus, she played a college student trying to save her school with a musical show. In Confessions of Boston Blackie, she stepped into the mystery genre, showing she could handle suspense as well as song. Films like Jukebox Jenny and Honeymoon Lodge gave her the lead, and she carried each one with confidence. She often had multiple projects lined up at once, a rare feat even for big names. Directors loved working with her. Audiences trusted her and producers kept casting her because she delivered every time. By the mid-1940s, she had more than a dozen screen credits under her belt. In Coconut Grove, 1938, she starred opposite Fred MacMurray in a light-hearted story about a band trying to make it big in Los Angeles. She played a tutor who joined the band and ended up being the key to their success thanks to her voice. The film wasn't a critical darling, but audiences loved it. Jukebox Jenny had her as a singer in a whirlwind of comedic chaos, and in Honeymoon Lodge, she shared the screen with AZ in a rare romantic comedy pairing. Other roles in Swingtime Johnny and High, Good Lookin' added more variety to her resume. Comedy, music, romance, she did it all and she did it often. Her name became synonymous with feel-good cinema during some of the toughest years in American history. Behind the scenes, Hollywood insiders were watching closely. They saw her not just as a reliable star, but as someone with it. She had the potential to be one of the greats. She had the looks, the voice, the talent, and perhaps most importantly, the ability to connect with people on screen. Fred Astaire, Fred McMurray, Ginger Rogers, she had shared scenes with the best and held her own. Her reputation grew, and by all accounts she was on the brink of becoming a household name. In A.Z. Nelson's 1954 autobiography, My Life with Harriet, he revealed something few knew at the time. Both he and Harriet truly wanted her to keep acting. This wasn't a case of a woman being pushed aside. Harriet wanted to be on the big screen. She had talent. She had momentum. And yet, the couple agreed to put their family first. That decision, mutual, painful, and rarely discussed, marked the beginning of a quiet sacrifice. Meanwhile, the world around her moved on. While she was home raising children and running a household, the very actresses she once worked alongside were exploding into stardom. Betty Grable, Rita Hayworth, Judy Garland, they became icons. Harriet watched from the sidelines, always wondering what could have been. She later admitted that it was a bitter feeling, knowing she had the skill and charm to be right there with them. But instead of premiere nights, she had PDA meetings. And that ache, that quiet, what if, never fully went away. Then in 1944, everything took another turn. Red Skelton got drafted, and A.Z. saw a chance to build something new. He created The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, a radio show based entirely around their family. It aired for the first time on October 8, 1944. At first, actors played David and Ricky because the boys were still too young, but soon the real kids stepped in. It was more than just a radio show, it was a family business. With sponsors like Heinz and Listerine lining up, the show racked up 402 episodes. It became a hit and gave Harriet a new kind of stage, one that reached homes across America. By 1952, the family was ready for television. ABC had already signed a contract that included an option for the show to go to TV, and they took it. What followed was historic. The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet became the longest-running live-action family sitcom of its time. It ran for 14 years, from 1952 to 1966. Viewers got to watch David and Ricky grow up in real time. They even saw the boys get married, and yes, their real wives joined the cast, too. The show wasn't a ratings monster, but it didn't need to be. Its staying power was built on consistency, warmth, and the illusion that what people saw on screen was real life. And to reinforce that illusion, Ozzie went one step further. He had their actual house at 1822 Camino Palmero Street recreated down to the last detail on the studio set. The exterior of the Real house was shown in the opening credits. The interior, built on a soundstage, perfectly matched their home's early American decor. Harriet even helped with the set design, making sure it felt familiar. Viewers felt like they were right there with them. It was intimate, comforting, and unforgettable. At its peak, the show pulled in 20 million viewers each week. Harriet Nelson, once a rising film star, had now become the face of the perfect suburban mother, calm, classy, always in control. And millions believed that was who she really was. But off camera, Harriet's life wasn't quite so neat. She'd wake up at 6 a.m., head to the studio by 7, and come home to dinner made by a housekeeper. Still, she kept the image alive. Critics and fans called the show a mirage of the American way of life. It was spotless, painless, exactly what post-war America wanted. Over time, Harriet became one of the three queens of 1950s television motherhood. Alongside Barbara Billingsley from Leave It to Beaver and Jane Wyatt from Father Knows Best, Harriet Nelson stood as the gold standard. But unlike the others, she wasn't playing a role. She was playing herself. And that's what made it so powerful, and so limiting. Her real identity, her past as a singer and actress, slowly faded under the weight of her television persona. Harriet Nelson wasn't who America thought she was. While most viewers saw her as the perfect TV mom, quietly pouring coffee and smiling through every scene, the real Harriet was something else entirely. Emmy-winning director Peter Jones called her a bombshell, not just for her looks, but for her energy. She wasn't just warm and polite. She was bold. And she liked people who didn't fit into the era's tight little boxes. Jones said she liked gay people. That was rare, especially in the 1950s. Most television ignored the LGBTQ+ community completely. Harriet didn't. She kept it quiet, but she embraced them in her private life. That one detail said more about her than all the clean-cut scripts ever did. But it didn't stop there. Harriet wasn't all cardigans and careful smiles. According to Jones, she loved off-color jokes, the kind you definitely wouldn't hear on network television back then. And at night she liked to have cocktails. Not wine. Cocktails. That was Harriet behind closed doors. And it made perfect sense if you knew where she came from. She had grown up in vaudeville, performing on stage since she was just 3 years old. That world was full of chaos, laughter, and misfits. She belonged to it long before she ever stepped onto a sitcom set. By the time she met A.Z. Nelson in 1932, she was already a seasoned performer. They married in 1935, but she didn't just settle into domestic life. She adjusted carefully. For the sake of the show, she played the role. But she never lost the bold, funny, risk-taking woman she'd always been. Even when she was acting like the ideal suburban mother on TV, people close to her knew the truth. Behind the scenes, she was still sharp and sassy. Long before the cameras arrived, Harriet had been a dancer on Broadway, working with people like Burt Lahr and Ken Murray. She even married comedian Roy Sedley in 1930, though the marriage was annulled 3 years later. She was no stranger to complicated choices. When she joined A.Z.'s band, she let her solo career take a back seat, not because she had to, but because it made their act stronger. Still, her personality never went away. It just got tucked behind the curtain. Harriet could act better than anyone realized. She turned herself into someone she wasn't for over a decade without ever letting the audience suspect a thing. Then everything changed. A.Z. died on June 3, 1975, from liver. He had cancer. He was 69. And with him, Harriet lost more than a husband. She lost the rhythm of her life. The show had ended years earlier, but A.Z.'s presence still held everything together. After his death, Harriet pulled away from the world. She stopped going to events. She turned down interviews. Friends said she wasn't the same anymore. She stayed home, quiet, grieving. According to biographer Michael Carroll, she never really found her footing again. Her sadness didn't fade with time. It just deepened. Years later, in the early 1990s, her son, David Nelson, was asked how his mother was doing. He didn't dodge the question. He just said it straight. She hasn't been in good spirits since Dad died. That was nearly 20 years after A.Z.'s passing, and still, she hadn't bounced back. David had stepped into his father's shoes professionally, but even he couldn't bring her peace. By then, Harriet wasn't hosting parties or smiling for the press. She barely left her house. According to a Los Angeles Times article from 1992, she spent her time with only a few close friends. The woman who had once symbolized cheerful American motherhood had become someone almost unrecognizable. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse, tragedy struck again. On December 31, 1985, her youngest son Ricky died in a plane crash near DeKalb, Texas. He was just 45. Ricky had been a teen idol, a music star, a household name. Harriet was devastated. She had already lost A.Z. Losing Ricky was too much. The crash had been sudden and violent. News spread fast. Harriet, already reclusive, shrank even further into herself. She didn't talk publicly about the crash. She didn't go on television. She didn't give interviews. People close to her said she was broken. She had nothing left to say. But Harriet's decline wasn't just emotional. She had another secret, one that had slowly ruined her health. She had started smoking when she was just 13 years old. Few people knew. She kept it hidden. It wasn't something the perfect mom would do, after all. But the habit never stopped. Over the years, it wore her down. In the end, it led to emphysema. Her lungs weakened. Breathing became harder. She couldn't walk far. She stayed indoors. The woman who once danced across vaudeville stages couldn't catch her breath. And even then she kept smoking in private. By the 1990s, her illness had become too severe to ignore. She spent those final years in the family's Laguna Beach home. It had once been full of life, music, laughter, dinners with friends. Now it was quiet, just Harriet, the ocean, and her memories. The house had sweeping views and warm light, but it couldn't fill the silence. Visitors described her as a shadow of the vibrant woman she used to be. She didn't smile much. She didn't talk much. She didn't want company. The house that had once been a symbol of success and love had become her hiding place. Harriet Nelson passed away quietly on October 16, 1994. She was 85. The cause was congestive heart failure, a condition that makes it hard for the heart to pump blood properly. It's common in older people and often signals that the body has finally grown tired. But Harriet's death wasn't tragic or dramatic. It happened in her sleep at her home in Laguna Beach, a peaceful end in a place that had become her escape from the glare of Hollywood. She had spent decades on screen, most famously as the warm and steady mother on The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. That show had ended way back in 1966, but its memory lived on, and so did hers. When news of her death broke, headlines from the New York Times and Los Angeles Times called her the ideal TV mom. They weren't wrong. In a world where celebrity lives often ended in scandal or chaos, hers closed with calm. No drama, just sleep. What made that moment even more moving was who was there with her, her son David. He had been her co-star, her friend, and her link to the past. As Harriet took her last breaths, David was sitting beside her. He held her hand. It was a small, quiet moment, but it said everything. Their bond hadn't been for the cameras. It had always been real. Years earlier, the family had lost Ricky, David's younger brother, in a tragic plane crash in 1985. And Ozzie, Harriet's husband and lifelong partner, had died in 1975. By 1994, David was the last one left. He made sure his mother didn't die alone. She wasn't in a hospital. She wasn't surrounded by strangers. She was at home with someone who loved her. That simple fact told you more about the Nelsons than any TV show ever could. After her passing, Harriet was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Hollywood Hills. It wasn't just any cemetery. It's where Hollywood royalty rests, people like Walt Disney, Lucille Ball, and Bette Davis. But for Harriet, the most important names there were closer to home. She was laid to rest next to Ozzie and Ricky. The three of them reunited. Even in death, the Nelson family stayed together. Their grave has become a quiet landmark for fans of classic TV. People come to leave flowers, say thanks, and remember a different kind of fame, one that felt safe, familiar, and full of heart. For all the years they lit up American living rooms, they're now side by side, silent, but still present in a place where Hollywood's stories never really end.